probably give it another minute or two here. But I know we had a couple of
We had a lot of school. Hey, it's school vacation week.
Yeah,
Send me a replay.
right. I had a lot of send me a replays for this one, so we'll be definitely going through this and making sure everybody gets the playback, so they can get the insights that we have ready and available today. But no, glad we could have as many people on as we have today. And like Peter said, a couple familiar faces. So kind of looking over it now. Where are we at? Oh, can't tell. Now my video's back on. It's so tough when you can't see yourself. Can I change my view? Oh, there we go. I had the speaker view on. That's why. Peter, you were hogging the spotlight for me. All right. Well, since we're just waiting for a few seconds, just sort of our usual spiel at the beginning of our webinars. Happy to have everybody here. We encourage everybody to keep their cameras on, say hello in the chat. Let everybody know where you're from, what industry you're in, and feel free to ask questions throughout the entire webinar. There will be a couple of moments for us to sort of jump in and talk a little bit more about ROI and have a little bit of input from you guys, the listeners here today. It's been one of those days, everybody. So without further ado, you probably know us pretty well, as we know many of you here on the call. But I'm Dustin Bailey. I'm our account executive and partner here at Anania Bailey, full service advertising and branding agency. I manage all of our accounts for our agency and building new relationships. And today I'm just joined with Peter Anania, my fellow owner and managing partner here at Anania Bailey, who's really the drive behind our agency's tenacity and is originally started this agency 2014, 2015, Peter?
Yeah.
Originally starting with websites as one of our big components of developing websites for the varying clients, as Peter started to build this agency sort of off the backbone from the web angle. So, whenever we're talking about websites, it's very near and dear to us. And we know that, these generally end up being a huge investment for your organization. So really taking a look at how much websites are costing this year, really getting an idea of your ROI, not just for the per dollar, but, the longevity out of the site itself, is a really important topic that we're going to be talking about today. Just to give you an idea of what to expect as we go from slide to slide. We're going to go over our survey results. So some of you might have been on our webinar 2 months ago, I believe, that went over all of the costs for websites, for photo and video, for branding, for rebrands here in our local market here in Maine. If you have not seen those survey results, it'll be a nice fresh view of some of the materials we were able to get from talking from various people in the industry. And, in various industries, actually, throughout Maine, both nonprofit, for-profit, from marketing directors, from communications people, just getting an idea of what that looks like. We're going to talk a little bit about freelancers and agency costs. We're going to talk about additional cost considerations. So when you're thinking about a website, what are the things that you may not be considering at the very beginning of the process, or what you're trying to put into an RFP. So just a couple of those items there, and then we'll take a look at a couple of different examples for ROI from different industries. We'll talk about what our framework is for sort of analyzing ROI outside of it, some of the stuff that you probably know from hearing just about anywhere, and some of the things you don't think about until you're looking at it from a full branding perspective. And then we'll open it up to full questions. So if there's anything that's just sort of lingering at the end of our call, at the end of our presentation, we'll have enough time to be able to answer some of those questions and just make sure that you're walking away with as much insight as possible today. So without further ado, Peter, go ahead.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And we try to keep these webinars short, sweet, and engaging. So we're trying to provide really valuable information, but we also want to hear from you. I know we have we have a lot of people on this webinar that could be presenting this webinar. So we definitely want some participation. So, just be ready to hit on mute and get the cameras on. So, Dustin mentioned the structure of the webinar, and first we want to dive into the actual costs of developing a website. So I recently conducted a survey of nonprofit leaders, business leaders, communications professionals, and CMOs. I gave them very little context and said, if you're going to be doing a video project, website project, rebrand project, what would you expect the cost of that project to be? And I will put the link for the full report in chat in case you're interested, because we're really focused on just websites in this particular webinar. But I will put the link to the full report so you can check it out if you're interested. So if these nonprofit leaders, business leaders, communication professionals were about to embark on a new website, what would they expect the cost to be? So the average of the results for nonprofit leaders, the cost was $16,250. Business leaders around $27,000. Communications professionals around $14,000, and CMOs around $68,000. So these numbers, unfortunately, we don't have the resources of a giant research firm. We can't interview a number of people to make it statistically significant. But it's certainly a great icebreaker to start this conversation off with. So I'd love to hear from some of you, because I know we have a mix of these different categories of participants we had in the survey. So I'd love to hear if you are surprised by these numbers. Are they what you expect? And again, when Dustin presents, I'll go grab the link and put it in to the full report. So put in a chat if you're surprised by these numbers, or they're right in line with what you would expect. So that survey, it gives us good information on the expected costs out there by the various individuals who are looking to embark on a website. But we created this candlestick graph, and this comes from Dustin's insights and my insights, and Nick, our creative director, on what we see out there in the marketplace. And these costs, they're really for straightforward branding sites. On the higher end of the range, you might see some custom functionality. You might see maybe a small e-commerce component, maybe some functionality with third-party custom plugins. Maybe you'll see kind of a larger website with a larger number of pages. But it's not going to be something heavy duty like a 10,000 product website on Magento. You're not going to see those within these ranges. And oops, sorry, I have to let someone in real quick. We chose to break down partner type by who you're likely to work with here in Maine. And we chose freelancers, small agency, and larger agency. So for freelancers, we expect the cost to be anywhere from $7,500 to $15,000. So if you're working with a freelancer, that's what you expect. Smaller agency, anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000, and a larger agency, anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000. Now, before we open this up for discussion, and I'd love to hear, from some of the people in here who have worked with these providers to build websites in a little bit. We want to hear from you. If this is in line with what you expect, because I know we have some nonprofits, we even have some CMOs in here, we have communication professionals. So we're going to open it up here in a second. But just to discuss the range of partners, it's certainly a spectrum. Freelancers, great for smaller budgets for less established brands. And the prices we list are definitely for a more experienced freelancer. The big advantage is obviously cost. It's more inexpensive to work with a freelancer. The disadvantages are it's going to be more time intensive when you're very busy. Like Catherine, I know you're very busy running a nonprofit. So yep. You need as many resources as you have. It's also really hard for one person to have all the skill sets. There are some unicorns out there. That's what we call them at our agency. We call them unicorns. Designer, developer, copywriter, everything. SEO. But with websites, it's a team sport. And so when you're working with an agency, or when you're working with a freelancer, it's just hard to find that person that has all those different skill sets. So on the flip side, working with agencies, it's more expensive. But with this comes the advantages. You get more capacity, you get more skills. So if you're working with a small agency or a large agency, you're going to get a project manager, you're going to get a designer, you're very likely going to get a creative director, you're going to get a copywriter, you might even get a copy editor. All of these talents combined form to make a really strong brand asset. And you have a team of individuals, guiding you through this overwhelming, complex process, which is very helpful. And you're going to really get expertise on. It's going to become more of a branding exercise. It's going to become more of an exercise in improving user experience and really doing a deep dive into what your functionality concerns are. They're going to help with operational efficiencies. So Dustin, I thought, just given the great mix we have on here, just to open it up to a little bit of conversation, and hear what do people think about the survey results. What do people think about what we think is in the marketplace? Does this sound in line with what people think?
Yeah, don't be shy on anybody. Go ahead, turn off the
I have a
mute.
question.
Yeah,
Sure,
What
Catherine.
is CP as communication professionals? That's what CP.
Yeah. And communication
And
professional.
CMO.
Yes, chief marketing officer.
Oh, okay.
Communications professionals, those might be in a nonprofit, might be in a business, but they're going to be your marketing director, your marketing manager, your digital marketing manager, your marketing coordinator. Individuals who are below a CMO. Alternatively, there are a couple freelance consultants that were in there, freelance communication professional consultants.
Yeah, and your CMO is much more of your C-suite VPs of marketing, etc. Higher up.
That's
on
what they thought the
chain.
price would be at the 68,000 average price.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I mean, it correlates. Like the bigger the company is, the more funds
Yeah.
and
we
they
had
think it's going to be more expensive. I mean, if it's
absolutely.
profit, of course they're going to want it less expensive. So
And there were some big retail brands. There was some higher education in this
Yeah.
survey for CMOs. So certainly,
Yeah,
you're gonna
run
see
the gambit.
larger organizations.
I mean,
Hey guys, Mike Dakota.
I saw.
I'll chime in a little bit here. Having just completed a new website project, the 50,000 is in the ballpark as to where we were for the site, but it was kind of split between like a brand strategy, messaging development piece at the outset. Kind of a brand immersion, if you will. And then after that was more of the programming, content development, and SEO behind the scenes. And
Mike, I'm guessing that was with a larger agency.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you know who the agency is.
I can make a couple guesses.
Yeah. But again, our site is, over 100 pages, and we do a lot of linking to the vendors that we represent in the marketplace.
Yep.
And so we did it that way so that we would not have to maintain the site for all of the products that we represent, because that would be a full-time job in our industry, which is building products, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's where we ended up. And I, in a previous life, also in the building industry, I had worked on a couple of sites, and that was probably the same range.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think, as we're going to go through some of our other items, I think that becomes part of that, part of the full mix when you're really thinking about the cost of a website and its full return on the investment that you make in it. there are a couple of different items that I know we're going to be going over. See, because
Hey,
one of the
Dustin.
ones that, yay, what's up, Mark?
No, I was just gonna throw in, I'm a pretty small operation. I've got,
Yep.
Myself and just brought on 2 more contract and loan originators in November. And I actually have a company that I'm using that basically their focus is realtors and lenders.
Yep.
And so a lot of what they do is, I mean, I can do a lot of customization. I mean, there are some limits, but in general, for hosting, for them hosting my website, as well as doing my online marketing and social media, with unlimited updates, you know, I'm paying about $5,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
and
certainly when you niche down in certain industries, like are you a mortgage broker? Is that correct?
I'm a mortgage broker, correct?
Yeah, it sort of becomes, you know, when you're, it's almost a separate discussion from this. I think when you are working with a niche agency that you know, has methodology, plug and play website that they can, you know, go from one mortgage company to the next and then customize it a little bit with your brand. And you know, certainly if you are in a vertical that there are specific providers like that, yeah, you can really get a great value, like it sounds like you have gotten.
It was certainly an investment. They do my SEO and I meet the number a couple times a month. And, you know, it's for me, it's been a pretty good value add.
Yeah.
Because that's not my expertise. You know, like I got plenty of other things to think about. So it's kind of nice to have basically have them in my back pocket. It's worth the expense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one, you know, as we're talking about this, right, many times a sizable organization or business is going to be, you know, getting one website and usually having it for X amount of years before we're thinking of having it redone or severely up, you know, significantly updated. Whereas something more along your lines is almost like subscription based. And I feel like a lot of industries have kind of gone into that sector depending on the size that it normally is. So like you see this with small realtors, brokers that are, you know, smaller teams like that. You see this in fitness, see it a lot in fitness, small gyms, small health and fitness things usually have those better subscription models to be able to actually work off of. So it has some of their own kind of benefits to it. So those are a little bit more out of what we're necessarily talking about, but there's always those, you know, it all depends on how you want to structure your website for your brand. So those are, as Peter put, those are good value adds for, like, if you're in the right industry and there's a service for it, definitely should be under heavy consideration because they really cut down on those additional costs.
Well, it's kind of one of those things that they had ideas that I was not even going to contemplate or think about, and so it just yeah, I've been in business almost 5 years, and this is probably the best one I've had. It's been just over a year, and so I've been pretty happy with how it's gone. So
How many did you go through before you were happy, Mark?
this was like 4, I think.
4. Okay. So there's a little shopping that has to be done when you're in that part.
Well, initially, I mean, when you go into business, first you just need an online presence. Just get something
Right.
up and one-time costs and done. And then, you know, once it evolves, then you look at wanting to do some more things. And I'm like, I'm not managing this. No way. So
Well, I was just saying, I think that leans right into it in terms of expertise. It's always good to have some level of expertise around you, whether it's a subscription base, whether it's an agency, whether it's a trusted freelancer, to make sure that your blind spots are being taken care of.
Hey, Dustin, Luke from Dennis, can I just throw in there, based upon the pricing that you shared and kind of tying into Mark and Mike's comments, you look at those prices and I'm just curious if that is soup to nuts, all initial content loaded, images, copy written, like push button, ready to go. I come from this world and most every site I've dealt with is a little bit of content, but it also puts some emphasis on the person or company purchasing the site to put their content in or to fill it with the stuff that they need to accomplish their SEO goals. So looking at these numbers,
You break off there.
I can't tell. Oh, okay, it wasn't me.
Dustin, you want to jump
So-
in and take that one?
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, hopefully Luke will get back into here. But yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, when we sat down and sort of like made our recommendations here, we made it in ranges, because what ends up usually happening is sort of the ball being tossed back and forth of like what can be done internally, what's truly not worth the time internally to be done, what, you know, how much content does a site generally have, and content comes in a lot of forms where there's not just images and text, but X amount of pages, X amount of products. It can be a lot of different things. So that's why when looking at these end up being a variety of ranges and not just a solid number for a website.
Yeah.
I will say that in our case, we have an ongoing SEO project, so that we're monitoring, you know, keywords and competitors. So that's an ongoing fee.
Yep.
And then if we add products to our site, obviously that will add, you know, hourly costs based on the programming involved.
Yeah.
And in terms of editing, you know, I can do some of the minor edits in WordPress, but if it's anything beyond small edits, I typically will get that back to the agency.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's always a little bit of that back and forth. And ongoing is definitely one of those additional costs that I think, depending on depending on the agency, depending on the freelancer you're working with, you know, depending on what kind of internal team you have to work with, that can always be a big part. So as you can see, our last little item on there is thinking about ongoing support. What does hosting look like after you get a website? What does your SEO plan look like after getting a website? There's a lot of different additional cost considerations that when people sit down and really think about, okay, we need to build a website, how do you sort of like gauge that range back and forth? And a lot of it comes down to these items right here. So we already talked a lot about, you know, lots of content, whether that's pages, whether that is photos, videos, you know, file downloads, docs, PDFs, collateral that's going to be digital, like and on the actual site. Copywriting and copy editing. So as Peter kind of described it, right, you have a larger agency, you might have a dedicated copywriter and copy editor for your project itself. You know, if you're looking to cut costs around your website, or or you want to go above and beyond, that'll probably be an additional cost, thinking about how structured, how well your copywriting and copy editing is going to be handled. You can't just throw it all to ChatGPT, even though we are starting to see a lot more of that, as we have had a whole webinar based on AI tools itself. But those are things that still need to be considered when you're thinking about this as a really strong brand asset. It needs to be reformatted in your voice, really speaking your mission, especially when you're a purpose-driven organization, especially when you're a nonprofit. Those need to have that included in there. And then, of course, Mike, as you kind of put it, right, additional costs that you may not be considered at first, but might be something that now that we're working on the website, it becomes a very specific thing to work on, you know, your foundational brand work. Is there an opportunity to talk about brand, to flesh things out, to freshen things and put it into the right perspective? Because this website needs to have longevity, needs to try to project the next 5 to 9 years. So how do we do that? Probably a lot of times, if you're going to be working with an agency, especially a larger agency, they're going to be talking about brand and making sure your brand is in a good spot. We've actually had several projects over the last 4 or 5 months where we started to talk about website, and then we slowly had to take that first step back and actually do a little bit of brand work before we had the full kickoff for the website. So these things certainly happen, and they become additional costs that you don't foresee when you sit down trying to write out that RFP. And then, of course, there's the usual things, third-party software and plugins, or custom plugins and API. I know, Catherine, you had an RFP a while ago for your website, and it had to really try to tackle the big challenges around membership, and that can be a very tough tool because there's not a lot of great options out there.
So I'll tell you, it doesn't exist, and so our website company is creating it now.
Yeah, so it's
because
one of those...
they looked at all the third-party software and asking what we wanted to do. And
there was no one tool that fit all things.
No. So it has taken them twice as long to do our website, but in theory, it's gonna do what we want it to do.
That's right.
But
Good-
it's a long time coming. So-
And that's I think one of the things that we've kind of thought about when we thought about doing another website webinar is timing. Timing is huge, and I know that's one of the items that we have later on too. But for some of the other additional things that you know that may not be considered when sitting down thinking about a website that definitely come up, and we've had a lot of conversations around, is, you know, if there's going to be an e-commerce component to a website, that usually ends up being a much more complex task. It usually requires a lot more work on the back end, and making sure that a system is going to be really built to suit. So there's usually a whole different aspect to that. And then of course, photography. So one of the things that people who are looking to develop a new website generally have usually older photos or stock photography and trying to get by. This is just like any other brand asset, where trying to localize it is one of the most important aspects you can have to make it a experience that, you know, your users can resonate to. If you're working on employment, that can be a huge thing for recruitment. So, you know, photography ends up being part of the conversation when you're thinking about, you know, additional cost of websites as well. So we actually have one sort of thought experiment that we kind of wanted to play around with. Just since we have a couple of people on the call, everybody's been jumping in and talking a little bit about their experience. So me and Peter thought it'd be kind of interesting just to sort of get an idea from people, and thinking about, you know, what does ROI mean to you, and, you know, what does ROI possibly mean for, like, when we're thinking about a couple of different industries, for-profit, nonprofit, and what's really important for them in ROI. So anybody want to take a stab? Anybody want to think about might be some of the most important things for a return on investment when you're thinking of, like, a local solar company? We don't have any local solar companies
Yeah,
today,
I can
right?
tell you for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
Dive right
Catherine,
in.
jump on the
What's
nonprofit.
I
important
can
to you?
jump in. So
Yeah.
obviously with the new website, we want more members, more family
Yep.
business, associate partners, a better tool that people can use, because we have a lot of resources, but our website wasn't reflective of that. It was
Yep.
because the third-party software that we use, we don't like, you know, it's not a good tool.
I know. I'm still using Wild Apricot for main ad and design, so trust me, Catherine, I'm sorry
It's
to see all the
horrible.
challenges. It's terrible.
It's been waiting. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get rid of it. But anyway, the other piece is that it also helps us, if it's a better website with better traffic and things, then it helps me with sponsorships or
Yep.
with people attending events and coming to things. So that's our ROI. A better website will bring us new members, more people to our events, more sponsorship dollars, and more for people to learn about who and what we are and what we do.
Yeah. And when we're thinking about, you know, the true ROI of a website, it's really defining those calls to action for nonprofits. It's really, you know, a lot of times in a lot of nonprofits, it's making sure it's easy and trackable donations, which is always really important as well. And of course, this is a great example for any nonprofit, right? For brand images, to be able to really have your positioning around your message, your mission, your vision, and your values really out there and in front of people, so they know what they're contributing to and they know what they're a part of. So that's definitely a big thing for nonprofits.
Dustin, for local solar, when I think I helped you develop these, and what I think of is only almost any local service provider, right, that doesn't have a very well established brand, doesn't have many locations, or isn't a bigger firm. You know, this is going to kind of tie into what we talk about in the next slide. We talk a little bit about our framework for measuring ROIs. You know, local service, local solar company, new, what they care about is leads. They want those leads coming in. They're going to really focus on inbound marketing and converting those leads, and then using their website as a foundation for those efforts. So for them, if they're a startup, if they're small, maybe they're mom and pop, conveying themselves as the biggest and best brand out there, maybe there's a little bit of that, but they're very likely going to be concerned about those things that you can, those digital marketing things that you can track pretty easily.
Goal conversions, demographic, traffic measurement, stuff like that's going to be super important for that kind of organization. And stuff like this, particularly in service provider, right, is usually longer sort of customer cycles and client cycles. So usually trying to get, subscribers, being able to build a little bit of community, a little bit of communication with the people who are interested in their service. So being able to have those at the forefront are really important. And they are like some of those immediate things that should be from when you're thinking about this at the very beginning of like, what is the strategy of our website? We're investing in this website. It's more than just a platform. It is part of a much larger strategy. What is it also doing for us? And then manufacturer, for a manufacturer, that's also the same kind of thing for service providers, a little bit more product focused, right? A little bit more thinking about, how to make it an ease of use for e-commerce, taking the complex e-commerce functionality and making sure that it works, that it's automated, that they're really getting essentially like time for the sales team back in, on their clocks, and really making sure that they have like accurate information to be consumed easily on the platform at all times. Because especially for that kind of industry, right, it's really making sure that people know what they do, all this, all the things that they could potentially provide and why they should use them, because those are going to be long-term contracts generally, and they're going to be using it as a it can have both a long-term relationship and a little bit of a storefront.
I know for manufacturer, we could stretch that and maybe substitute a little bit to distributor, because I know we have two that play a little bit more in that, or a little bit more in that industry on this. And I know, not to pick on Luke, but I know for Luke, what's important to him is to give value. That's kind of like one of the things I think he's really good at, is giving value as a differentiator to his customer base, going out there providing a website that's a really good resource with very valuable content for his target audience that then separates him from the competitors. And Mike spoke about his website process, and I think it's a lot of what you were saying for him, saving his time, saving salespeople time, having a really good resource for customers to be able to answer, to number one, be found, but also to answer some common questions and just be a very solid resource for customers.
Yeah, and I would add that there's a call to action piece to the manufacturer or the distributor in our case, and it is again about lead generation. So what we try to do is to tie it in through a CRM. So we've been using HubSpot to get the leads in. The goal is to have them fill out the form and get information in, and then we want to disperse it out to the Salesforce. So we use HubSpot to do that. But I know a lot of people do use Salesforce, which is a similar program.
Yeah, and Peter, that's a good take on the value side, because it's hard to extract traditional ROI. We're not generating sales. There's no ad retargeting or anything like that. It is simply to extend our culture and capability. We have a team of salespeople that work Maine and New Hampshire, but this is our 24/7 sales representative, our customer service representative, our liaison, our ability to showcase what we have to offer. So it was one of those things early on where we knew we needed to invest to build it and invest the salary of the people to maintain the content. We even have a professional chef that we have generating video content, photos, recipes, all for the purpose of showcasing that value and being a beacon for basically what separates us from our competition.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think you guys, like I said, you guys do a fantastic job with that, and it's something that's become a core part of your brand and a big differentiator. So I think that's a great segue into kind of talking about our framework that we use to talk about ROI. And we've developed this framework to educate our clients, and the measurements across ROI it's a spectrum. Some are definitely much easier to track than others. For example, you know, tap to call phones. When you're on the mobile phone, you tap the phone number to call. Very easy to track with Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. But what about a user's perception of your brand when they visit your website? How do they feel about your brand when they visit your website? That's much harder to track. I know Dustin from his corporate days, he's got a couple of tricks, and he'll say, well, it's not impossible to track, but certainly harder to track than something that's out of the box with Google Analytics. So when it comes to measuring ROI, there's certainly KPIs that are a lot easier to track than others. So kind of to go through the framework a little bit, we break this up into goal conversions, brand image, and operational efficiency. And goal conversions, this is a Google Analytics term, but it's really trackable events that take place on your website. Brand image, that's the hope of using a website to elevate your brand and the perception customers, employees, and investors have. And then operational efficiencies, that's reducing administrative costs through automation on the website. So I'll dive in a little bit more to goal conversion stuff. So then, you know, I'd like to, you're kind of the operations geek, and you know, you love branding so much. I'm gonna throw it over to you. But goal conversions as the first part of this, again, it's a specific action on a website that we can easily track. Orders, tap to call, form submissions, newsletter signups, email clicks, downloads, all very easily measurable. So we as a marketing team or our sales team can quantify what a 10%, 20%, 50% increase in these is going to affect the bottom line for organizations. And you know, a note for this is this isn't all going to be accomplished just through increased traffic through search engine optimization or search engine marketing or social media management. A lot of this can also be done through user experience and a stronger brand. It's going to have big impacts on these as well. So these are all levers that we can pull on as marketers to improve our results. But Dustin, I know, like I said, from your corporate days, you have some tricks here, but you know, measuring brand image and the impact, it's much harder to do, isn't it?
Yeah, so where most of your like quantitative data, you know, is really something you can measure in goal conversions, where you're really measuring a tactile piece. It's a number on a board. It's something you can make a percentage out of. Your brand image is a lot harder because it's much more on the qualitative side. You know, you're really measuring people's perception and experience. And, you know, there's a couple of ways to do that. And, you know, my recommendation is always, you know, find ways to provide, you know, sort of a form of feedback, whether it's a review or it's a feedback form after an action is taken. Those can be super important for understanding where people are coming from, how they enjoyed their experience, because that's really the best way to obtain that information firsthand and sort of have that confirmation to know that what parts of it were done right and done right by your audiences, your key audiences. But essentially, you know, what you're really looking around with brand image is your consumer perception. So, you know, who are the people who are going onto your site? Who are the users themselves? What are their impressions of the site itself? You know, and, you know, does the website itself reflect your brand? You know, is it conveying your value proposition? And above all, right, is it trustworthy? Those are really important aspects to nail down, and it's sort of like the hidden ROI of a good website. You know, when you feel it, you know, when you go onto somebody's new website and you have that nice warm feeling of like, wow, look how nice and new. And, you know, it's like we walk into a restaurant that just was recently renovated. You feel part of that attention to detail and that newness, that freshness that really kind of comes with it. You know, a little harder to measure, but it is there, and it's something that's very important that you can't necessarily count out from your ROI. Same thing exists for the employee perception. So, you know, when you're talking about your internal teams and you know, when you're thinking about it from inside, right? So is it easy to work on the inside? Is the pathing inside of it easy for talking about careers and or being able to have a certain level of employee engagement? Are the employees using part of the website as part of their engagement, and how is that being processed, and how is that being executed? Is that employee value proposition, is that part of it sort of baked into the messaging there or into the function? And then of course, is the brand, conveying that's an attractive place to apply? So thinking about a little bit more on the recruitment side as well. All of those perception pieces are really important when you're trying to shape a new website. And then of course there is the investor perception. So if you are, we talked a little bit about startup cultures and industries and businesses that might be looking at, using a website for this. We know we've actually worked with a couple of nonprofits to rebuild their online presence so they can have a stronger footing for, for applying for grants. So everyone has a certain level of investment perception to them. So a new website, it's just like anything, like you would talk about collateral, right? Has a part of that net effect that you can't necessarily count out from an investment standpoint. So having the look and feel is not just for the user, it's not just for the end user, it's for just about everybody who's going to be involved in the process and who's going to be experiencing the brand. And then, of course, for brand image, we like to also think about the user experience. Usually not something that you can always measure quantifiably. So you have to usually get a little bit more of input from people of like, was it easy to navigate? Was it easy to find information? Was it easy to take an action? All of these items are a little bit harder to be a quantifiable measurement, but it really does reflect how you are strategically looking at your website and using it as a proper brand asset. And then the last one, one of the things that me and Peter, when we were talking about ROI in the very beginning of this, I threw out operational efficiency, because I hear it so often from every single person who wants to work on their website, make a new website. Catherine making a very customized tool so it solves like 5 or 6 problems all at once. Operational efficiency is huge and is one of the biggest reasons why we want to change things, because generally websites sadly get old, and if they're not maintained properly, they get older quicker. And then you start finding yourself in a tool that's no longer easy to use. It's hard to use. Parts of it stop working. It's not easy to measure your data. It's hard to be able to track and see an action being made. So, operational efficiency is all over the place for, how a new website can really solve a lot of these issues. And everybody has a little bit of a different operational sort of knot to undo, usually around their website. So whether it's content uploading and making sure that there is an ease of use in providing value, like when you're Luke and his team, or whether you're just trying to make sure that there's a certain level of automation between making sure membership gets added and certain things are automated for communication, for renewals, for all those kinds of things like Catherine. So operational efficiency is something that we've been throwing out a lot more lately, because there's just so many challenges. And it's one of the biggest reasons when you look at ROI, a lot of times it gets lost in the mix. You don't look at the timesheet afterwards because you haven't checked how many hours you've spent on trying to make a broken system work. So, we like to take a step back and really see like some ROI items that you're not going to normally see, because a lot of times there are a lot of web only people are going to look at just goal conversions and seeing what that actually looks like. It's really important to know, like, getting time back is huge, not just for your not just for yourself, here on the call, or probably your full team, whoever's working on the website is probably feeling a little bit of the strain of like, boy, I wish this could go quicker. So that's a huge part when we look at ROI. That's sort of like the last stop, one of the ones that you can measure a little bit more tactically, but something you'd probably have to start measuring well before you start writing an RFP for it.
I think this is really helpful. I think it really puts it in perspective.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good.
Dustin, I was just going to add, we heard from Mike earlier. He said, parts of this website, if we didn't have it, it'd be a full-time job. So
yeah,
pretty clearly there's a very quick return on investment for a website that helps with that that heavy lift.
Yeah. It's and I always like to, whenever we're kind of like struggling with, where's the economy right now? Well, time is always important, regardless of how how valuable the USD is at a certain given time. So it's really important whenever we're looking at, certain brand assets, particularly your website's a huge one, is how much time is it going to be saving on the back end and over time? Because if that asset lives for 9 years, think how much time you're getting back. Think how many salaries you're getting back to be able to actually put towards something else that could be useful for your organization or for your business. It's huge. One that's a lot harder to sort of sit down and measure out when you're thinking about it at the very start of the process.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So that's
we have some time for any lingering questions that people have. Thanks everyone who participated. It's great to have some familiar faces coming back and adding some great value to everyone on these webinars. We really appreciate that. But
I was going to say those replay people are really winning out today, everyone. So we're all the ones came into the office and made it happen.
I have a quick question on AI.
Yeah,
sure.
A little bit off. Well, not really. What are the advantages of AI with respect to translation for websites or other collateral materials? Have you seen a lot of people using that, and that does the price come down quite a bit?
So yeah, we have one international client this is very important to. I think it's a scale of, is it a customer base that uses a different language? How, like, is it one that is 20%, a significant percentage? Then I think that's when you really want to use a translator, human translator. If not, then you might be able to get away with those tools. Again, there is a user experience thing but you have a little bit of wiggle room. I think people are a little bit more patient.
Yeah. There's definitely, it's definitely to scale, as Peter said. Like if you expect a significant amount of people of a certain language group or a certain culture group, you should certainly think about restructuring part of the site to that, really making sure that their language is acknowledged, because we're making huge tracks with AI right now, which is fantastic, but it's not 100%. And language is very dear to most people. And I feel like that's, you always recognize it when you're reading something and it's a bit off, and even doing ChatGPT, there's like a couple of these small things that they're still slowly smoothing out over time. And that's English to English. So when you're thinking about, English to another language, depending on how different the language is, it can be significant. So like we have a couple of conversations right now with like something a little bit smaller, as they want to be able to have some resources really guided towards a minority group that speaks a certain language, particularly in state here in Maine. And one of my biggest challenges with discussing that with them was like, I think we should talk about how we can build collateral. We can have those different options in there. There should be certain items, but to make an entire web experience, one language or another, there's certainly some challenges around doing it correctly. So yeah, that is a big challenge. Are you finding yourself in a bilingual, trilingual?
Well, not so much where I am today, but in the past I have.
Yeah.
And we did use a translation service to do that, which worked great. But I was just interested to find out what you thought about it, because I assume further down the road, AI will probably be a good source for that.
Yeah. I'd say give it more time.
Yeah, right now there's still going to be some awkwardness where it is right now.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Again, not knowing the full audience for you guys, I thought it might be good for you to talk about how a potential client, right, could get a more accurate quote up front. I would imagine you have people calling up saying, "Oh, hey, I need a new website. Mine's old. What does a website cost?" when in reality there's a dozen, 2 dozen questions that you'd want to ask to begin to scope that in? What are some of the things that you look for in the initial stages to be able to accurately quote a website?
Usually content first. So how much content there is to the site, I think, is always a really important question, because I think that scales things pretty quick when it gets down to it. And then usually the larger items first. So like, is there custom functionality? You know, is there a need for photography? Is there a strong copywriting need with something like this? The larger items, I usually try to make sure that like we have a shared understanding, and then we can kind of talk closer to it, and always checking and seeing, you know, essentially, you know, what is the company's or organization's budget, because I think that always does play a certain role in it, because most of the time you're you know, there's always going to be a limit to what you can do. So I think that it's in my process, it's really making sure that those larger key points are in a good place. How's the brand? Does it have enough assets? And how many assets does it have?
To that note of the type of business or what's your budget, have you ever pointed somebody to a Wix or a Squarespace and
Oh
said,
yeah,
you know, this is better for
absolutely.
you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I'm the one that answers the phone calls, and it has the algorithm in my head of how can we help this individual. So some it's call in, they're a less established brand, or maybe they're like Mark, who is in an industry where there's technology that's kind of plug and play and can be customized quickly. So we might recommend that. Or if they're more less established, we might recommend a freelancer, or if they are less established and are in a startup stage where maybe they have some time, maybe they have more time than resources, then definitely like a Squarespace or a Wix is certainly the way to go. Or if they're like a volunteer-based nonprofit and someone on the board has some experience with marketing, it's certainly you know, the DIY way can be great for those types of individuals. You know, they have to really take into account how time intensive of a process it can be, and the opportunity cost that comes from spending your time doing that over you know, doing something else.
Yeah, like I'm mentoring for the Maine Center of Entrepreneurs, and I'm a part of their Top Gun program. I'm working with one individual who essentially runs a sort of a closed gym in Lisbon. And a good example is that he needs to find time. So a DIY option is no longer good for him, but he got himself established early with more of with a fitness based website that has a membership thing built in, has the CRM built in. You know, there's a solution very specific to his industry. And he asked me several questions like, should I consider moving onto WordPress, onto this, onto that? And I was like, no. I was like, you're at the right place to just keep this website where it is. And more of the updates for him need to be like, let's clean up the actual content and not worry about what platform it is on. So definitely scaling things is important. And we definitely recommend make those recommendations, because you got to have an online presence in some form or fashion. But some, like Mark, right, have a whole industry that's based to be able to support that kind of industry, that kind of person in that position, versus some people might have to sort of start from scratch and do a bit of a DIY Wix or Squarespace kind of solution. But I usually say, like, if you have like 5 employees, it's probably time like to get off of a Squarespace site. If you're at a certain growth point, whether you're for a nonprofit, there's a certain limit where it's like the simple solution no longer does it, and usually you need a more complex solution.
One more quick question for you.
Yeah.
I'm helping somebody who has they're a physical therapist, and they're using one of those platforms that are included with the membership to whatever certification they have. And I checked it out the other day because she was wondering why she wasn't showing up on any Google searches. So I hopped in the back end, and there was like zero anything for optimization. There was none of the typical things that you would look for there. So I guess 2-part question is that kind of standard for those types of free web or low cost included membership things, that they don't focus on the SEO? And if that's so, what's your first and second recommendation for acquiring better SEO if they still wanted to use that website? Do you go and fill out all your Google My Business stuff, or is there some other step in there?
Yeah, so that's a good one. Generally, a lot of those smaller solutions are not good for SEO. Shopify is a good example of like e-commerce that is not strong SEO based because of the way the tool is built. It's better to have WordPress with a WooCommerce attachment, or even an Etsy page sometimes could be better. So like there are a lot of challenges depending on the tool that you're using. A lot of those have those challenges. They sometimes have the tools to be able to at least do meta titles and descriptions, but the base software that they're based on is very hard for Google to read. So it's like skips over them essentially. So this happens a lot. Every tool is a little different. Some are better than others. Squarespace, thankfully, is not nearly as bad from my experience and some of the things that I've been able to sort of learn hands-on. But yeah, I definitely would recommend like doing some in-depth research on certain tools. Like if I'm going to use this for my PT business, what do the reviews say? What does anybody with the technical knowledge actually say and assess it? Or if you have somebody, a good web freelancer, right? Hey, can you just take a look at, this person's using this type of site. I really want to use this kind of site. Give me the download for what it looks like. Let's run it through a couple of tests, because you throw it through GTmetrix, you throw it on SEMrush, you throw it on Moz, you can start seeing the kind of results of whether that's actually working or not. So
yeah, and I would say that I think that's all really good. These services that Dustin said, they're not all created equal. I'm not sure if this is a platform or a platform with a service on top of it, but doing the vetting and the research, and I think a lot of individuals in the position that you're talking about, they can find it overwhelming to even know what they're actually paying for. So just starting and verifying on the invoice, or is this service just for the platform, or is it for the platform and some SEO, or is it for the platform SEO and some SEM? But as far as like what DIY things they could do, I think if I'm understanding what you're saying, Luke, I think a lot of even just making sure all the meta titles, meta descriptions are filled out, the website's performing well, all the key pages are there, putting out some fresh content. Definitely the Google My Business profile, probably start there
directories
first. Think about doing maybe a Yext listing as well, just to make sure that you're in all the directories and start to build some authority.
Yeah, I'd say external SEO items would probably be a good choice if the tool that they're using is not built well for SEO. So anything that's going to be directory based, social media profiles, those kind of things are better for getting it off the ground at least. They do their small pluses here and there.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. This was great, guys. Thanks for all the participation from everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for not catching too much senioritis and joining us this lovely Friday. We appreciate everybody jumping on the call today. So we will be sending the replay out. So in case there's any other questions that you have, you will see, most of you already have my contact info. So if there's any other questions that you have, to reach out to me, and I can jump into a call anytime to go over stuff with you. So yes, thanks everybody for jumping on today. Boy, it's going to be one of those afternoons, everyone. And yeah, we look forward to having everybody on the next webinar, which Peter, I think that's going to be late March.
Yep, we'll be in late March.
So keep an eye out, and we'll let you know what the next topic is.
All right. Thanks everyone.
All right.
See ya. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.